I think it's fair to say that Just Stop Oil as a movement, as a organization, has completely and utterly failed if its objective was to garner wider support. Now, it's failed if that was the objective. Garner wider support and change policy. In fact, by their own admission or by their own, statements, that is specifically what they want to do. They want to influence policy, specifically to stop all oil-based consumption in this country. Um, Leaving aside the fact it's an utterly unrealistic policy, they have done nothing to change policy. Um, Keir Starmer has condemned them. He hasn't yet returned money that they have given to the Labour Party, but he has publicly condemned them. Um, and I think that he knows, even with an impending victory, he cannot be seen to be pandering to groups like Just Stop Oil, who are massively unpopular with the wider public. Now, in their latest stunt, they decided to hijack a wedding, and it's not the first wedding that they have done this to. It was a high profile wedding. It's been called the Society Wedding of the Year, and it was involving the 7th Duke of Westminster and Olivia Henson. Um, 7th Duke of Westminster is the richest young person in the country, under 40. Prince William was in attendance, as were thousands of people in the city of Chester. Now, that may not be to everyone's taste. They are obviously very wealthy. They have a privileged life. That's that. It may not be to everyone's taste. But it's important to recognise that this protest was not about the fact that they're wealthy people. It was part of the infantile stunts of Just Stop Oil. What they'd done, two women decided to let off some sort of orange confetti or an orange paint stunt near the church. Thankfully, it didn't really, the cathedral, I should say. Thankfully, they were drowned out by booze and it didn't really materialise too much. But, the point is what they wanted to do was disrupt a young woman on her wedding day. A day that should be the happiest day of her life. Now, based on the photos, I don't think it had much of an effect on the couple, thankfully. But it's not the first time they've done this, and I think it's disgusting. Um, on Talk TV, they were asked, or a supporter of Just Stop Oil was asked, well, how about I come and disrupt your daughter's wedding? But that's missing the point. That really is missing the point. I do think the media is partly to blame for elevating this vile group. I am tired of seeing interviews with them because any journalist that thinks they're going to get through to these people is wasting their time. You know, they're never going to directly answer questions. If you ask them, how does, vandalizing a painting or disrupting someone's wedding, how does that reduce CO2? What they will do is talk about the climate crisis and how billions of people are going to die in a couple of years and how they want to fight for future generations. They'll never directly address that point of, what does vandalizing paintings do to help this? Um, as a movement, I do think they've utterly failed because if you look at the numbers on social media, it's barely changed. I think it hovers around 100,000 followers, and there's a hardcore that's much, much less, and that's probably being generous. I think actual hardcore members who are prepared to get themselves arrested, probably talking a few hundred people. And often they're repeat offenders. They are hardcore activists, and this is in a country of 68 million people. So make no mistake, they do not have public support. What you will get in this country is a lot of people who will say something along the lines of, "Oh, I understand the concerns, but I don't like their tactics." Well, actually, responsible environmentalists should even distance themselves from the sort of things that they're demanding because it isn't realistic. If we were to get rid of all oil-based products, society would fall flat when you start looking at what that actually involves. If you look at the alternatives, for example, electric-based products, there's controversial sourcing involved in that, including the mining of cobalt in sub-Saharan Africa. That's hardly an ethical alternative. Um, Not even withstanding the fact that the world's biggest emitters are not the UK, but countries like China and India, the US and Australia also contribute a lot to carbon emissions. But the point here is, even if the UK was to break itself, if society was to completely go back to the Stone Ages, and we were absolutely to get rid of all oil-based products, it wouldn't actually change the global output. It would make a difference. Do they really think that if this country does that, it will somehow encourage the Chinese and Indian governments to follow suit? Of course not. And remember, they're fast-growing economies, so they're balancing out the environmental responsibilities with lifting people out of poverty. There's a lot of things I dislike about the Chinese and Indian governments, but I do appreciate it as a difficult balancing act. Um, I've never made a secret of my contempt for Just Stop Oil and their sister groups, Insulate Britain, Extinction Rebellion. I think they're dangerous cults. I don't think they're just a little bit eccentric. I think they're actually quite dangerous. I mean, any group that radicalizes young people to the point where they're suicidal has to be seen as dangerous. In this sense, I don't think it's any different from any Islamist or far right group that seeks to radicalize young people. Getting 16-year-olds to believe that they're going to die in a few years to the point where they're tearfully crying on a bridge that they have intruded on, a motorway overpass, which has happened. I've seen this young people. It was actually in Chile, Britain, but they're all part of the same cult. I don't really differentiate between Extinction Rebellion, Just Stop Oil, and Insulate Britain. The specifics may be slightly different, but the tactics are more or less the same. Um, there's a lot of things I find infuriating about them, aside from the sociopathic approach of messing with people's lives, stopping them getting to all sorts of things. The hospital thing has been mentioned a lot, that you stop people getting to hospitals, but it's other things as well. When you deliberately stop people going about the business that's stopping them getting to work, which therefore stops them getting a livelihood. I know for all their so-called socialist credentials, they seem to have contempt for the working class. Often the people that they're targeting are the very sort of blue-collar workers that will be impacted by their infantile stunts. Um, that's an important point. But it's also, people going to weddings, people going to funerals, people going to meet loved ones at the airport after maybe having not seen them for a long time. There's all sorts of scenarios that they're directly impacting. Now, people, their apologists will say, well, any sort of protest will disrupt. And I think it's certainly true from the pro-Palestinian protests. But the thing that's so obnoxious about these green groups is the disruption isn't just a side effect. They are deliberately seeking to hurt the public. And I think that's disgusting. They're not targeting energy companies. I don't like Greenpeace, but at least Greenpeace targets, Shell and other such companies. With Just Stop Oil, what do? They stop people getting to work. They stop people trying to enjoy art exhibitions. They're sociopaths. Um, I really have a deep contempt for them. And the thing is, I think the hardcore offenders should certainly be in prison, but I understand why they would actually enjoy that. They want to be seen as martyrs. I think it's better to cripple them financially. I think they should be sued into bankruptcy. And I think judges should impose some sort of a cash flow freeze to stop them getting funding from abroad. They've been funded by Hollywood billionaires, or at least multimillionaires, like the film director, whose name temporarily Adam McKay. Yeah, Adam McKay has funded them. Um, so I think cutting off the cash flow would be an important thing, because these people, the hardcore activists, almost want to go to prison because they see themselves as being like Nelson Mandela. They really are that deluded. Um, but when I say they failed, the good news about this is, if we look at 2024 compared to other years, yes, they're still active, yes, they've still engaged in stunts, but they have been somewhat more low profile this year. They haven't quite got the media traction, which is a very good thing, because they thrive off media attention. So maybe the collective press is finally starting to get the message that giving these people airtime it's not proper journalism, and it's it's what they want. Um, they crave it. They crave the attention. Um, so I have noticed in 2024 there's been less coverage of them. I think that's a good thing. They haven't gone away. We shouldn't assume that they've gone away. I would also look at the Green Party of England and Wales. Now, the Green Party of England and Wales is a much older organisation than these groups, but they are kind of the political apologists for the likes of Just Stop Oil. Because, I mean, actually, I think the Green Party of England and Wales are quite extreme. They are literally the absolute last party I would vote for, save perhaps the nationalist parties. Um, I think beneath that kind of supposedly eco-green surface, there's actually quite a hard left undercurrent. And recently, we've seen with the Green Party of England and Wales, they've been scrutinised for candidates being accused of serious anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic tropes. And there's even speculation they may be involved in entryism to other parties. So, the Greens are speculating they might get 4 seats. I think the Green Party of England and Wales has developed a bit, but I think people need to be very careful about voting for the Greens. They may think it's kind of a protest vote and it kind of shows their Green credentials. I would urge them to look a bit deeper, because if you start looking at Green policies, actually they are an incredibly irresponsible and, in my view, quite extreme party. If you look at their policies on defence, if you look at their policies on crime and justice, um, and put aside any sense that they're just passionate environmentalists, they're actually pretty far left, um, and I absolutely would not give them the time of day. I'm not saying everyone in the Green Party is an extremist, but I think there is a pretty questionable underbelly there. I absolutely wouldn't give them the time of day, but like I say, they're kind of the apologists for Just Stop Oil and Co. Also, the Greens are not a national party. They support the breakup of the United Kingdom. So I'm not overly worried about them. I don't think that I doubt they'll even get 4 seats. But uh, I would say that Just Stop Oil has utterly failed because they haven't changed any environmental policies. In fact, Sunak done. He was accused of doing a U-turn. I'm not saying I agree with that, but that just proves that they have failed. Even Greenpeace, which is supposedly a more reputable organisation than Just Stop Oil, and that's being quite generous. They were scheduled to have a meeting with the government, and because of their infantile stunt, they targeted Rishi Sunak's constituency home in North Yorkshire. The government then blocked them from the meeting. They said the meeting wasn't going to go ahead. So even Greenpeace, which at least doesn't target the public, show themselves to be utterly failing to recognise the public mood. The thing about these groups is, they have a hardcore of supporters who will energetically support them and call them courageous and compare them to the suffragettes. Although I would say the suffragettes themselves, there's a big misconception about that, because it wasn't the suffragettes but the suffragists that got women the vote. But that's for another video. Um, Outside of the hardcore supporters, I really don't think the wider public support these groups. In fact, at the moment, Greenpeace is involved in a legal campaign with Shell. Shell is suing them for trespassing. Now, the wider public have no love for Shell or other greedy energy companies. I certainly don't. But it was telling that people were saying, I hope Shell wins, because the wider public sentiment on green groups is they're fed up of their obnoxious behaviour. I would argue that groups like Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion, and Insulate Britain have done great damage to the green movement, because the public associate them not with being passionate environmental protesters, but narcissistic exhibitionists who think that they're above the law and think they somehow have a right to mess with people's lives. That's the truth about these groups. That really is the truth about them. Um, and some shady figures behind them, like Roger Hallam. Um, I hope they continue to dwindle in influence. Um, and I think the fact that no government policy has kind of been brought about by their actions is a good sign. I would like to see them bankrupted. I don't think throwing them all in jail is the answer, although some of them deserve it. I think it would be better for judges to impose a sort of cash flow freeze. There must be something that can be done about that. I'm not a legal expert, but there has to be practical solutions. because otherwise you just get a rotating cycle where they're arrested, they're fined, and then they just go back to square one. Um, Adrian Whitting and one of the hardcore protesters, activists, that's exactly what he does. He gets arrested, then he puts up a crowdfunding saying, give me £5 if you want me to do this, £10 for this, £15 for this. So judges need to wake up and see what's happening. The government needs to see what's happening. And Keir Starmer's government better not pander to them, because that will not go down well. Certainly won't go down well with me. It's good that he's publicly condemned them, but he needs to go further than that. He needs to, show that he isn't going to give them the time of day. He's not going to have meetings with them. They don't deserve it. I don't believe that groups who engage in criminality deserve to be treated as legitimate protesters, especially when that criminality involves messing with the public. But in terms of wider public support, they are overwhelmingly unpopular. And they delude themselves that they have public support. They really, really don't. They're overwhelmingly unpopular. Even people who might agree with some of their proposed contentions, I think they recognise that as a movement they have failed, or at least they recognise that those tactics polarise the public. I call on responsible environmentalists to call these people out. Continue supporting green business, pushing for environmentally friendly solutions, pushing for a reduction in CO2, etc. But if this group continues to piss off the public, they're just going to continue to damage the green image. And that is a problem, because I'm not a climate change skeptic. I do think we are seeing rising temperatures, and I think there is a lot of pressing issues that need to be dealt with. I don't quite go along with climate alarmism. I don't think billions of people are going to die in a couple of years. And I don't think the solution to addressing green issues is to completely freeze society, and make us regress. That is going to hurt actually some of the poorest people hardest. So it's a stupid approach. Um, and it is notable that often these green extremists are comfortably middle class. Very, very few of them are working class. They tend to be university educated. They tend to be doctors, retired clergymen. They're not blue collar workers at all. So yeah, I just think they're disgusting. The sort of things that they engage in, the total callous disregard for their fellow citizens, and the arrogance to say that they're doing this for future generations. Are you helping the future generations by, for example, stopping a sick child getting to hospital? That's a complete contradiction. Um, Also, the hypocrisy. Do they really think the public is going to believe that they get to these protest sites by walking? Of course not. They drive there or they get buses there. Their high visibility jackets are oil based. Um, Contemptible people, absolutely contemptible. But I will say, I don't want to give them more attention than they deserve. 2024, I would say, hopefully has been the turning point where they have finally started to fizzle out of the public radar. But I think the media has a big part to play in this, and it starts by not giving them interviews, because it's a waste of time. You can say, "What if I turn up to your wedding?" and they will just deflect. So journalists thinking that they'll get through to them, and I will say it's Top TV, GB News, and so on, LBC. Um, they will have pundits who denounce Just Stop Oil, but simultaneously give them a platform. So they're kind of hypocritical. Um, I don't think they deserve a platform. They've been given a voice, a lot more than they deserve. I would like to see much bigger voice given to their victims, people whose lives have been messed up, who've been disrupted by them, i.e., people who've missed urgent appointments. I'd like to see a lot more interviews with those people. Let's give them a voice.